All right, lest I be accused of bringing you only bad news, I'm going to bring you first a little transitional humorous news, then a little bit of good news, and then we'll deal with the big topics for tonight. First, the humor. By the way, this is one of those kinds of humor which is laughing to keep from crying, that kind of humor. Okay. In Tuesday's paper, yesterday's New York Times, on the op-ed section, on opposite the editorial page in the first section, there was a piece written by Mr. Jamie Dimon. He is the head of the J.P.Morgan Chase Bank. You know, when you see Chase every 2 blocks in any direction, he's the head of that bank. And he has wisdom. I know it's wisdom because the title of his op-ed is Higher Wage Wisdom by Jamie Dimon. So he thinks it's wisdom. In any case, it's whatever wisdom he can manage, so I want to talk about it. He announces he's come up with a penetrating idea. It's really new. I'm going to read you from the first section. Wage stagnation, income inequality, a lack of quality education, insufficient... Issues like these have led approximately 2/3 of Americans to believe that the next generation will be worse off than the last. At J.P.Morgan Chase, we're starting to deal with this by giving thousands of employees a raise. Oh. Mr. Dimon has discovered inequality, and he's concerned about it. He's concerned. This is exciting. As you read on, he explains. A pay increase, it's the head of a bank, a pay increase is the right thing to do. Hey, a man who's a banker and who knows what's right. You don't get that often. So here's what we're going to do. Get ready, because First of all, he lets us know a little statistic. It is really good. Turns out that 18,000 employees of J.P.Morgan Chase enjoy currently a minimum salary of $10.15 an hour. Yeah. You see, a man is really on top of the situation. He knows poverty because that's what he does. He makes it for 18,000 people who get $10.51, and here's what he's going to do. There's a man with a big heart. Ready? He's moving them up to $12, and between $12 and $16.50 an hour over the next 3 years. You wouldn't want to rush any of this. You don't want to go too fast. These poor people, you give them some money, they get all confused. So you help them. You make it real slow. $2 over 3 years, so you don't get nutty and drown in alcohol. The little bit you can buy for that amount of money. So I did a little calculation. It's what they teach us in graduate school. To become an economist, you have to do arithmetic. The fancier the arithmetic you do, the better the job you get. So I figured out it would be important to see just how Jamie himself was doing, given that he's concerned about poverty. So I went and I checked, and in the last full year, 2015, Jamie Dimon's pay was, for the last year, $27 million. So I assumed that he worked all 52 weeks of the year. Yes. I'm trying to be, I'm assuming he worked the whole year. Guy works himself, these bankers, they really, you can see it when you look at him. Man's exhausted. Okay, 52 weeks. And then I calculated that he worked a 40-hour week. What's the norm in our society? So that allowed me then to figure out how much he gets an hour. If you get $27 million a year and you work 40 hours each week for 52 weeks, here's what it works out to. I did it twice to make sure I didn't make a mistake. Jamie Dimon last year earned $12,975 an hour, which means that Jamie in 2 hours made more money than those 18,000 people did in the entire year. The estimates right now are that large corporations around the world, but particularly American ones, are sitting on historically unprecedented amounts of cash. These are profits that they've earned over recent years. The estimate these days, $2 trillion, which is a great deal of money, which they are not investing. In other words, they are either sitting on the money or lending it to a government. You're going to hear more about that in a minute. Or in other words, being very cautious with it because they don't think they do not want, when you ask them, they tell you very straightforwardly, we do not want to invest it in our business. We don't want to grow our business. And the reason is, nobody's buying our stuff. We have a hard time selling the automobiles we produce, the computers we produce, you name it. We're not going to invest in expanding our capacity because we got no one to sell it to. And so you've developed an economy which has more capacity than it's not that it's not the need for people to have more goods, that's there. But the capacity to pay for them, that's not there. They can't. So the company says, I'm not here to make goods and sell them. I'm here to make money from making goods. And if I can't sell those goods, the fact that they're necessary for people doesn't pay my bills. I can only pay my bills if I can sell what I produce at a price that yields me a profit. That's what I can't do. So I'm going to sit on this money. And then the economist says, well, sir, ma'am, the population is growing. There's more and more people who need jobs. If you don't invest that's how you grow an economy. That's how you provide more jobs. If you don't do that, there's no jobs for people. To which the businessman says, it's not my job to worry about jobs for people. My job is to make money for the company that I run. And so I'm going to do what's best for that. And the other problem, somebody else should solve that problem. That's a very serious question. Now, why is that? Why is that? Well, before I tell you why it is, let me show you how bizarre this gets. As more and more companies are sitting on vast amounts of money, one of the things they do is put the money in the bank. So you're accumulating what is the property of a company sitting in a bank that had nowhere to go because nobody's borrowing money out of the bank to make big investments because there's no market out there. Well, what is all this money that can't find anything? What is it doing? Well, the answer is it's trying to figure out how to be safe. What kind of an investment? They say, I'm going to do the safest thing one can do with a lot of money if you can't invest it in anything else. I'm going to lend it to a government. Because then, at least I have the guarantee that the government will pay me back. I'm not going to give it to a little government that might not pay me back. I'm not going to lend it to Paraguay or Malaysia. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to lend it to the United States, to Switzerland, to Germany, and those kind of places. So that's what people have been doing. Because the money is so eager to be lent to the government doesn't have to pay interest on that money because the people who have it are so desperate to do something, to give it into a safe place, that they'll give it to the government if the interest rate goes from 3% to 2%, or from 2 to 1, or from 1 to 0. And what has now happened with $7 trillion is now being given to governments who will not give you back the same amount of money you give them. It's very important, it's called a negative interest rate. Some of you have seen it that's what it is. Today, if you lend money to the German government, the Swiss government, the Danish government, the Japanese government, they will give you back at the end of the year less than what you give them now. And rich corporations and banks are falling all over themselves to do that. Now think with me a minute. Why would you, if you have $1 billion, we're talking people a lot, why would you put it in a place where you know a year from now you're going to get back less than what you give them? And the answer is because you are scared, S-H-I-T, less, about what's happening in the world economy, and the best thing you can hope for is to give it to a government that just takes a small piece of it and gives it back. We've never seen this before. Not on a scale like this. We've had occasional moments of it, but not on a scale like this. It is now expected that here in the United States, over the next 12 months, we will get to it. We're very close. We're less than 1% at this point, a little over 1% and 1%. So and it's heading down again and again. It's a very serious sign that people's notion of the economy that's coming down. New bonds are now being issued by governments 20 and 30 years with a virtual zero interest rate. That means someone is lending money to a government, knows that that money is going to be sitting there for years, earning them nothing. But that's worth it to them because at least they have that. And if everything else collapses, they'll have that. We will all, of course, the risk that if everything else collapses, so does the social consensus, which keeps that bank open.
Right.
With anything in the vault.
Right.
Okay, so another feature of this is the taking of money that can't be invested in a productive way to produce jobs and products for people's lives is instead going into these financial games, driving down interest rates, making it possible for governments to pay very little interest for the borrowings that they've done, which creates, among other things, a very false sense of okay. Our deficits in the United States have been enormous. The government is owing more money than it ever has in our history. But right now, there's no big pressure because the interest rates are so low that the government doesn't have to pay a lot of interest to carry that debt. If interest rates go up, we're suddenly going to be confronted by a government telling us we have to take billions to pay interest on this enormous debt, which means we can't pay your pension that we promised you, we can't cover the fire and the police and the teachers and all the rest of the public sector. So who knows how this is going to play out, but for the moment we have these absurd negative interest rates to which the entire financial markets are now trying to adjust because it's very hard to do it. And you can see also how bad the economy is because borrowing money now is virtually costless. And still it isn't happening. Individuals can't borrow enough because they're already so indebted they can't carry anymore. And corporations have no incentive to do it because there's no market. Well, why is there no market? Next question. Same sign of trouble. There you have to understand, and we've talked about this before, but it needs to be repeated so everybody is clear. It's very, very important. Starting about 40 years ago, the 1970s, American capitalists, to make more money, decided that they could do so by doing two things very systematically. One, replace people with machines, the computer. That's why everything now is computerized. Number two, move production out of the United States, where wages are high, to the rest of the world, where they are lower, particularly to China, India, Brazil, places like that. Okay? What that meant was the getting rid of high-paying jobs and replacing high-paying jobs with low-wage jobs. Indeed, part of the solution was to bring large numbers of poor people here as immigrants so they could be paid low wages. If you ever check around New York, who's on the construction sites. 10-minute conversation, you'll discover people from Asia, Africa, Latin America working, if they're illegal, way below what they ought to be paid. If they're legal, some of the way below. Destroying the construction workers' union, or at least weakening it very badly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all over the world over the last 30 years, you've basically seen, just to keep it simple, the replacement of high-wage jobs with low-wage jobs. Yeah, but the problem is, this is great for corporations because they don't have to pay as much. That's the good news. The bad news is, if you replace high-paid workers who had a lot of money to spend with low-paid workers who don't, you're not going to be able to sell your stuff the way you used to. Duh, exactly. Duh. By the way, the theorist, just in case you're interested, and not to scare anybody, but the theorist who first really worked out beautifully the contradiction in capitalism, that every capitalist is constantly trying to save money on wages by laying people off, by lowering the wages, by bringing in immigrants, by moving to another country. Those people are then going to, in the end, shoot themselves in the foot, because by having lowered the wages they pay to everybody, the people to whom they have to sell what they produce won't have the money to buy it. His name? Karl Marx. It was his indictment of capitalism, one of its internal contradictions, that makes the system work in this herky-jerky way. That for a while it's a boom. We're cutting high-paid workers and we're getting low-paid workers and we're making a fortune, followed by bust when it dawns on them after a few years of really excitement that they can't sell. They got nobody to sell to. If you replace an American earning $30, $40 an hour with a Chinese person earning $2, you're not going to do real well. Because the $2 an hour Chinese worker can't buy the way the $30 or $40 an hour American worker could. There's no way out of that. The United States is in trouble because it can't support the production that was geared to an American level of wages, now that that is no longer what it was and is being replaced every day more by people paid much more. That's why the car companies left Detroit to go to the South and to go to Mexico or to Canada or now to China and India, because they can pay much, much, much less. Lawyers in this country, I don't know how many of you know, the law schools are all collapsed. They have no students. Nobody's going to go to law school anymore. Why? There's no jobs. Why not? Because we outsourced. You can have a lawyer sitting in India, speaks English, went to the same law school, more or less, that the people here did, but who's happy for $7,000 or $8,000 or $9,000 a year salary. Whereas a lawyer in the United States, start laughing if you talk like that, or crying, depending on their mood. But don't be a lawyer anymore. It's over. You can't. You can't. These are signs of a capitalism that is not solving its problems. What are the solutions that are coming forward? The answer is nothing. It's very important you understand. Nothing. Nothing is changing. By the way, the definition of intelligence, if I remember it from the dictionary, an intelligent person adjusts what he or she is doing when the reality shifts. A person who's lost their sanity is a person who continues to do the same thing no matter how much it doesn't work. We're doing the government. Mrs. Clinton, if she wins, and that's apparently what's likely to happen, she's more of the same. She says that. That's right. It's not, the same. And the woman, in case you're interested, Mrs. May in Great Britain, in case you wondered, that is more of the same. Exactly. Mrs. May, before she became a Conservative Party member of Parliament, was a banker. I'm sure that'll give you a lot of comfort. To make you feel even better, I will inform you that her husband of many years is a banker. That she was Home Secretary, which in England means you're in charge of internal affairs, police, and immigration. And she has been a very hard anti-immigration Home Secretary. Sounds a little like Trump. She's a hard conservative. She promises to continue what David Cameron, the former one, to show you how much the conservatives are in control. Mr. Cameron, when the vote came in and he had lost, because he went everywhere in the country supporting staying with the EU, announced that he would resign as of October. And the big businesses in England said, "You're not resigning as of October, you're resigning tomorrow." Which is why we have a new prime minister today. Because yesterday was tomorrow, and he's gone. Because they want this to be rearranged quickly, they don't want the uncertainty. This is scrambling, folks. This is not a society in control of itself. This is a society spinning out and trying, put on a face, everything's under control. But it isn't. To be fair, it's an economy that can't function. It's very hard to get it under control. But you need at this time to come up with something new. Nothing new is coming up. Mrs. Merkel in Germany, austerity for Europe. Austerity, which is now, if I had more time, is putting an immense squeeze on Spain, Portugal, and now Italy. The big flashpoint right now, as we're speaking here, is Italy. Italy has $2 trillion worth of debt that it cannot pay. It has $400 billion of bad loans that the banks cannot collect. The legacy of all this trouble. They can't do it. And they're forbidden by the German unified Europe to bail out again because it's politically impossible to have another bailout. The mass of people are so angry in Europe about the first bailout, like Americans are about a bailout here, that you can't have the government, the banks cannot go back to the government, get another bailout while everybody else is in the soup. There'll be a political impossibility. So they can't. They don't. So they're doing the same thing, but it doesn't work, but they don't know what else to do. Last thing, yes, last thing. Some of the banks are proposing in Italy, and the government is, okay, how do we get out of the political impossibility of another bailout by the government? The answer is a bail-in. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to tell you this, but you're going to be upset. Just remember, I didn't invent this. I'm just telling you about it. A bail-in is when a bank doesn't have enough money to pay its depositors, to give people back the money that's theirs, because they've made loans to people who can't pay it back. So the bank had no money. Either can go to the government and get a bunch of money. That's a bailout. That's what we did in this country. Or they can do a bail-in. Ready? That's when they go to the people like you who deposited the money in the bank, and you deposited it, but you're not getting it. Bye, money. Bye-bye. That's right. Bye-bye. The bank, to compensate itself for having badly loaned your money, isn't going to give you your money back. That's the solution. It's called a bail-in. It takes the people who've put money in the bank, either buying the bank's bonds or depositing, and it takes it. Sometimes it gives you a long-term bond that you can't cash in for a number of years in exchange for taking your money. But your money, bye-bye. No more. It's taken by the bank, you put it in. And remember when you were a little kid and they explained to you, you put your money in the bank for safekeeping. When the society falls apart, it isn't safe anymore. And you're at a point where the problems of this society can't be solved at all. They can't envision a solution. And what they come up with is so hair-raisingly horrible that you know what kind of a reaction. Back in December, nobody paid attention. Back in December, small banks in Italy collapsed, and the government imposed on them a bail-in. The political reaction of the people of Italy was so severe, as you might imagine, that they don't want to do that again. But the Germans won't let them have a bailout. So you can't have a bailout, you can't have a bail-in, and you're sitting on a situation that's deteriorating. Italy right now is what Greece was before it hit the fan there. And that's why watch Italy, for those of you who pay attention, because it's the flashpoint now. What are the economists, my colleagues, doing? That's the last thing for today. The answer is, and it's very important that you understand, they are doing nothing. I read the journals. For those of you who know conventional economics, neoclassical, that's the mainstream tradition. They are continuing to write their articles and their books as if the crisis of 2008 didn't happen. The austerity afterwards didn't happen. The system is fine. It's unbelievable. It's like being at a card game, and suddenly the news is a tornado is coming and a tsunami with it. It'll be here in 2 hours, and you look at the other people and they say, deal. What? Deal. I mean, I'm sitting here, where's my car? And you realize these people are dealing with this in the classic terms of denial. We are in a culture where all the things I just said are on the news every day. I didn't make any of this up. But the denial is it doesn't add up to anything. We have my colleagues, it's unbelievable. And my Keynesian colleagues are busy saying, like Paul Krugman, it would be better if we had a more government deficit. Paul, we're way beyond that, Paul. Paul, here's a thought for you, Paul. Paul, hello, Paul. We got a system problem, Paul. You never think like that. You never say, maybe we got to have a different system. Maybe a different system would handle these problems. That's where we are, because this one is falling apart. You're not dealing with, you pretend that's not an issue. And I'm here to say to you, it's the only issue left. Otherwise, we are all, he's so upset about Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump is a product of all of this. If we hadn't had all of this, there'd be no Trump. He would have been laughed at this year the way he was 4 years and 8 years ago when he tried it as well. But things have gotten worse. In my profession, no, they haven't. The university seminars continue, the arguments continue, people are making careers by debating one another in a very polite fashion, and they get their endowed chairs at the right universities. It's an amazing dance to watch. It is literally watching a whole profession dancing happily off the end of the pier and wondering as they float down what happened here. It is surrealistic for those of us who want to rap on the door and say, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing when it doesn't work over and over and getting the same bad results of what you're doing. So enjoy, if you haven't read it, enjoy the Jamie Dimon, really. It may be laughing to keep from crying, but reading Jamie Dimon gives you an understanding of what is meant by the saying that the people who run the society, the elites in the banks, in the economics department, in the political, the concept of disconnected from reality comes home in Mr. Dimon's, or Dimon's, however you pronounce his name, in his right. The man is happy as a pig in a place I can't describe, because everything is really in order. And there was a small problem with these people who didn't get paid real well, but he's going to raise their wages by $2 an hour over 3 years, and then everything is really much better. Wow. You have to be gone to live in that place.